Welcome everyone to the video. Welcome to the channel. I kind of continue this, kind of what I've been talking about last several videos. So if you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing, like the video, let me know your thoughts down below as well too in the comment section. But we're titling this one, The Collapse of Shared Truth. And I definitely believe that something strange, is happening and has happened in modern society, and that we no longer necessarily agree on what reality is. And I'm not just talking about politics, and I'm not necessarily talking about religion. I'm talking about just the basic facts. Um, two people, any two people can watch the same exact event, read the same article, look at the same evidence, and walk away with completely different conclusions. Um, Not slightly different either, completely different. And the craziest part of this all is that both people are absolutely convinced that they are right. Um, in the last episode, I talked about the age of endless crisis, how everything just feels unstable. Everything feels like it's just falling apart. But I think one of the reasons for that is something deeper. We just don't share a common understanding of the truth anymore. There was a time, not very long ago, where society at least had a shared baseline. People didn't agree on everything, of course not, but they were working from the same general set of facts. You had very few major news organizations, news networks. You had local communities, institutions that people trusted, the media, government, religion, and, maybe most importantly, you had fewer voices competing for your attention. Back then, even disagreement looked different. You could argue, about what something meant, but not whether it actually happened. And that's a big difference. Now, compare that to today. Two people live in the same country, the same city, and exist in completely different realities. What has changed? We have the internet, we have social media, there are algorithms. The YouTube algorithm, what it's feeding, the information it's feeding you. We went from a world of very limited information to a world of indefinite information to instant information. A lot of people used to have to wait for the newspaper. Now we get it straight to our phone, an alert, and it sounds like a good thing, but there's a catch. You're no longer just consuming information anymore. Information is being tailored to you. Think of AI, specifically for you, the individual, what you click on, what you watch, what you engage with. All of it feeds an algorithm, and the algorithm learns what you believe, and then it gives you more of it. So you'll be stuck. So over time, something, subtle happens. You stop being exposed to different perspectives and you start living in just a feedback loop. But here's where it gets dangerous because it doesn't feel like a bubble. It feels like the truth. Everything you see just reinforces your beliefs. Of course, you're going to feel like you're right. Anyone who disagrees with you must be misinformed or dishonest or even considered dangerous. Now multiply that across the millions of people in this country. We're not even talking about the world, just in this country. And that's where we are today. This is where it connects to something I've talked about before and ideology becoming doctrine. Because once people stop, sharing a common truth, they don't just become confused, they look for something else to anchor themselves to. And That something becomes identity, a political identity, social identity, cultural identity. And once your beliefs become a part of your identity, you don't question them anymore. You defend them at that point. It starts to look a lot like religion, and not in the traditional sense, but in the structure. You have beliefs, you have a community, you have a sense of right and wrong, and you have consequences for stepping outside of that belief system. At that point, facts don't even really matter anymore because it's no longer about discovering the truth. It's about protecting identity. And that's why conversations feel impossible today because people aren't debating ideas. They're defending who they are. So what happens when the society loses their shared faith, their shared truth? First, institutions start to break down. If people don't trust the media, don't trust the government or each other, then then every piece of information just becomes suspect. Second, everything turns into a crisis because without a shared truth, there's no neutral ground. Every issue becomes us versus them, right versus wrong, or good versus evil. And that's exhausting. That's why everything feels so intense right now. It's not just disagreement, it's total fragmentation. And when people can't even agree on reality, how do you even solve a problem? How do you move forward? That's the real issue there. So where does that leave us? I don't think the answer is going back. We're not going back to a world with a few shared voices. That's over, it's done. But maybe the answer isn't, isn't more certainty, but it's less. Maybe the real challenge now is learning how to live with uncertainty, being willing to say, I might be wrong, or, there might be more to this. Maybe I just don't have the whole picture. Because if shared truth is disappearing, then humility might be the only thing that replaces it. And, that's not a weakness. Maybe perhaps that's the starting point for, something, even better, you know, with us as a society. But, that's the video today. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below. Again, please like the video, hit the thumbs up. That helps the channel, this very small channel. And subscribe if you do like this type of content. I will definitely be dropping more shorts as well too. I just kind of cut up these videos and make them, smaller short segments that just kind of cut straight to the point. But either way, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.